Started. We recognize that the Hogan Administrative Center occupies the land of the Ho-Chunk people. Please take a moment to celebrate and honor this ancestral Ho-Chunk land and the sacred lands of all Indigenous peoples. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Ms. Baumann?
Here.
Ms. Berkedahl?
Here.
Dr. Cooper-Stoll?
Here.
Dr. Garcia?
Here.
Dr. Jimenez?
Here.
Ms. Leahy?
Here.
Ms. Moots?
Here.
Mr. Korberg?
Here.
Mr. Spivey?
Here.
A quorum of the Board of Education is present, so the regularly scheduled meeting of September 19th, 2022 is called to order, and we'll now have the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand and face the American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And second. All right. So we will hold off on that motion for just a second because we are going to formally have the swearing in of our newest board member. So if I could have Ms. Moots please stand, and do we need to have her in the middle, or could we just have her at her chair? What would work best? Doesn't matter. If you just want to stand at your chair. All right. And if you could please raise your right hand and repeat after me. And I state your name.
I, Emily Moots,
Having been elected
having been elected
to the office of school board member,
to the office of school board member,
affirm that I will support
affirm that I will support
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
and will faithfully and impartially
and will faithfully and impartially
discharge the duties of said office
discharge the duties of said office
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations
Thank
and
you.
welcome to the school board.
Thank you.
And so now I'll take that other motion off the table. So moved by Mr. Korberg and seconded by Mr. Spivey to approve the agenda for tonight, unless there is a motion to amend. Is there a motion to amend? Hearing no motion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion has carried, and we will move on to public speakers. We do not have anybody registered to speak, and so we will move on to the approval of the superintendent's consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the items on the superintendent's consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Who was that? Is that Dr. Bristol? Okay. So the consent agenda is a mechanism used by the board to deal with routine business that must come before the body. Are there any items that the members want to remove from the consent agenda? Hearing none, then with a motion by Mr. Korberg and a second by Dr. Cooper-Stoll, the items on the superintendent's consent agenda are approved as presented and will move to the board consent agenda.
And I'll make a motion to approve the items on the board consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second? Second. All right. Motion by Mr. Korberg and a second by Mr. Spivey. The items on the board consent agenda are approved as presented unless anybody wants to remove the only item on the agenda. I don't think anybody does. So we will consider this approved as presented unless there's questions, and I'm not seeing any at this point in time. So we will move on to the information items. An operational expectation monitoring report, OE11 instructional program. And so I will turn it over to Dr. Engel.
Operational monitoring is something that we do routinely as a part of the school board. So the school board has created policies which govern our school district. And with those policies, the school board also, in collaboration with the school administration, developed monitoring reports. So criteria that we want to evaluate our progress on. And so annually, the administration brings forward those monitoring reports to the school board for review and consideration and to hopefully ultimately approve. And so this is part of that process. I think this is the second half of OE11. It is a bulky OE, but it is full of great information. Dr. Harsey is the person responsible for OE11 in our administrative team, and so he's going to continue on with the second half. And this is there's a lot of information here, but it's a great opportunity for questions, to learn more, to inquire, and typically the next meeting, we would also consider changes to the monitoring report or even the policy potentially, but the monitoring report specifically for the next time that we monitor it. And so as you develop thoughts or ideas, it's an opportunity to consider, what could we add to this to learn more, or is there something in here that's extra that we don't need? But it takes the consent of the board as a whole to make those changes, and I think that's a process we're probably still working through. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Harsey.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Engel. So, like Dr. Engel had mentioned, maybe the second half today. So before we get into 11.7 beyond, I will just say that with some appreciation to Ms. Steigerwald, we hopefully have the links working, and so if you've had a chance to review some of the links, hopefully they're all operational. And then also in 11.1 indicator 3, I will say, first of all, this was no additional work, but in indicator 3 in the book review form, one of the links that was in the book review form, if you kind of had to go into a link and then a sublink, but it was the process and content document that's now, right next to it. So I kind of heard a request, like it would be nice if there was, the process associated with it. So it's right there. Believe me, we didn't have to create anything. It was just pulling out a link and attaching it there. So I just wanted to point out those two additional points. So jumping down to 11.7 and picking up, and as Dr. Engel had mentioned, as questions arise here in the second half, just stop me and we'll be happy to address those. In 11.7, we start with something that's near and dear to this board and has been, ensuring that the instructional program utilizes a social justice lens and is culturally responsive and competent. And so in indicator 1, the district's strategic plan really launches us into this area, and the strategic plan annually focuses on social justice and cultural competency. We take our lead from the strategic plan of educational equity, and in indicator 1, the staff development report that was completed by Kelly Schmitz. She was the supervisor of our educator readiness before she now is principal of Logan Middle School. She completed that report, and as you can see, it is certainly steeped in our work. And then the second link there, administrative goals. We want to make sure each year, as Dr. Engel brings the administrative goals forward, you will see certainly our educational equity component laced throughout our administrative goals as well. In indicator 2 and indicator 3, you're going to see there's processes that are required by the Board of Education. In indicator 2, the first one, the district curriculum team utilizes a process for course and program development. And so what we've linked as evidence, our director, Mike Lahucky, Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment, chairs our Teaching and Learning Committee, where course proposals are reviewed. And so we've linked the form that is utilized. So that's the first link. A program development examples are social studies program. So just like school improvement plans, we have program improvement plans. And so that's part of the process. And then you can see actually one of our course proposal forms completed in our Hmong language course. And we had over 100 students register for that new course this year. Indicator 3, district utilizes a process for new initiatives to be launched and reviewed based on equity foundations. We use what's called an implementation science approach. Instead of introducing something and hoping that it has a stickiness to it and a fidelity, we go through a 4-step process to try and ensure that. And so we also linked here our student success coach and new teacher professional development. That implementation science it can be seen through both what we did with our student success coaches and our new teachers, in that it was very intentional how we laid out professional development as we onboarded those folks. And then our social responsibility speaks meetings with stakeholders. So we are in our second year with Amanda Goodenough and Laura Abalera. Of course, this document is in arrears, but you can see the various, as you click on that link, various efforts that they met with folks and worked with folks at various levels throughout our school district. Any questions there before I go on to 11.8?
Any questions?
And we can circle back to anything, but 11.8, indicator 1, all programs are annually identify instructional priorities. This is something that we bring the short form document to the board in mid-July each year, and you've seen those. Again, the primary instructional priority starts with our strategic plan for educational equity and goes all the way through engagement, part of which is our trauma-informed work, our student mental health work, and our Attendance Matter as an initiative this year. And then the second link there is the longer form document. Our program content area leaders, our supervisors of different areas work very hard and very closely with their staff to ensure the instructional priorities meet the needs that are contemporary and current in our district. In indicator 2, the district analyzes improvement for students in academic interventions to determine the effectiveness of the intervention for that grade and student need. The first piece of evidence there is a Tier 3 data report example. I believe what we have there is a curriculum-based measurement for a 5th grade reading intervention, a Tier 3 reading intervention that was given daily, 30 minutes for reading fluency with benchmarking that each week. The second item there is a Tier 2 and Tier 3 reference table. You can see in that link various needs and then options in those areas. The third link is just DPI's framework for equitable multi-level systems of support. And then finally, definitions of our RTI tiers, very useful document for all folks in our organization, frankly, to better understand Tier 1, 2, and 3 in our school district, roles and responsibilities, and then opportunities for students. In indicator 3, we're coming to an area where we've indicated we did not meet the benchmark. There's some caveats here. So in indicator 3, each elementary school will be in the category of meet state expectations using the criteria of student achievement, student growth, closing gaps, and on track to post-secondary readiness and absenteeism rates. So in the evidence, the narrative we wrote, we did not have state testing in 2019 and 20 as a result of the pandemic. The 2021-2022 report cards have not yet been released. So what we have here is the 2020-21, in 2020-21, 2 elementary schools did not attain the meets expectations benchmark. And then we've got the link to all of the elementary report cards there. As you know, as Mike Lahucky has pointed out many times, it's difficult to have an elevator speech about the report cards. But for example, we have, an elementary school whose student achievement is above the state level, but didn't meet the expectation because of how it's weighted for that particular school. Each school is weighted differently based on a number of factors. And so the fact of the matter is, to the letter of how it's written, we did not meet the benchmark. But I just like to point out some of those important elements that many of you are very familiar with. Indicator 4, same kind of scenario. Each middle school will be in the category of meet state expectations. And we had one middle school that did not attain the meets expectations benchmark. Again, this is the 2020-21 report card. The 2021-22 report cards have yet to be released. And then in indicator 5, it's the exact same wording except for our high schools. Our high schools in 2020-21 did attain the meets expectation benchmark. In indicator 6, all buildings participate in continuous improvement process and establish annual building goals through their school improvement plans. We did include a folder there for all of the school improvement plans. Last year, we did have all buildings report to the district leadership team, provide an overview to their school improvement plan, to share essentially best practices. And we shared one, we pulled out one example. Longfellow's happens to be there, but you have access to all the school improvement plans. In 11.9, indicator 1, financial resources are committed to better ensure reduced class sizes. We're fortunate in the fact that we are eligible for achievement gap reduction in the school district because of instructional coaching over these many years. And so we shared the June 6th achievement gap reduction report that Dr. Lahake provided for us. Indicator 2, systems and processes are created and implemented to preserve community and support neighborhood schools. We decided that the whole child framework would be an excellent piece of evidence this year, particularly given, we had several presentations and students come to us and speak to mental well-being, mental health. And so we have a number of mental health providers in our community who have come to our schools. We've got 55, I believe, providers that come to our schools. We've got the partnerships with Gunderson, we have partnerships with the county, all working hard to try to provide for the gap that we know exists in terms of the resources that we do have and making sure that our students know that those resources are available. In indicator 3, proportional enrollment in our choice and charter schools. This is then the third area where we identified that we were not meeting the benchmark. As I mentioned last Monday, this is the second year in a row that this area has not lived up to the expectation. And you can see, based on the evidence, some of the things that we've been working on there, including working on enhancing bus opportunities, reducing the barrier of paperwork, having better communication, et cetera. Frankly, we just need to roll up our sleeves and be more intentional with some of our work around here, just to see if we might be able to move the needle. Now, just because it's not proportionate doesn't mean it's necessarily in one direction. We've got some pretty noisy data here. We've got some that are very high free and reduced lunch above, for example, and some that are well below. And so if you take a look at that data, you can see that the data is split in multiple directions, both up and down. Before I go on to 11.10, I'm going to stop right there and take a breath and ask if there are any questions.
Any questions from the board members? I guess one question I'd have, Dr. Harsey, and maybe this is for a longer conversation, but when I look at 11.8, indicators 3, 4, and 5 with the report cards, I think when we look at, the total of meeting expectations, it's hard to look at just a sum total when there's so much more detail underneath that sum total, but it's also hard to get into the weeds there too and try to pick out what makes sense to use or not use. I think state testing becomes a much more complicated measure. So I get, in my mind, I'm trying to figure out what would make more sense if just using that meets expectations, exceed expectations is not an appropriate way to measure what our students should be doing at that point in time, or what our schools should be doing. So I'm just trying to figure out in my mind, and I don't know if you or Dr. Lahake or anybody in the administration have better measures to use, or should we be digging a little deeper instead of just saying we're just looking at the meet expectations, exceed expectations? Should we be dissecting that more?
Well, it's certainly, thank you for that thoughtful question. It's not, certainly not uncommon for the district, for the state report cards to be one of the triangulated pieces of data. There's no doubt that that's an important piece, and we certainly don't dismiss it. We like to be thoughtful around that piece of data. Between now and when we suggest some edits next week, if I could take a look at other coherent governance districts and see what language that they use around, because a lot of folks are using school report cards, the Wisconsin report. That's not unusual.
Right.
But if there's some other thoughtful approaches to that, if there are ranges then I could certainly bring that to the board for consideration. And, you know, some continued dialogue around that. But it's an unusual, we've wrestled with this and tried to educate the public as much as we can around, you know, when those report cards come out and schools see their ranking or rating and they've done good work, but maybe they haven't had the growth while their achievement is above the state, the example we used earlier, it's difficult for the staff and the students and the families to see that as representative of their collective efforts. But it is currently what it is, and it's one of those things that schools across the state are wrestling with, and it's improved over the years. And so I'm happy to look into that and see what other coherent governance districts are doing and bring that back.
And like I said, I don't know that there is something better out there, but, obviously one measure is never a good idea. Is there multiple measures that we should be thinking about? And like I said, it's a longer conversation, but in my mind, it's always been that, when you see 3 stars or 4 stars, there's so much more to the story than just that one thing. And so I understand, and you have it correct, that it should be marked as no on those. But again, like you said, it is hard for the staff in the school when they know they've done great work, but then that just one measure does not show the great work that they've done. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and the only other thing I would say is, as the results come forward, and there's further conversation that are had around that, obviously this is an OE versus a results, but I mean, that's where you also will dig in and hear more about how did we get to where we are.
Right.
So I'm gonna ask this question on behalf of the newer board members and kind of as a refresher for myself, particularly when we talk about kind of expanding on the school improvement or the meets expectation, all that, the school report card. What happens if a school is not at exceeds expectation and they're just at meet, or if they're at do not meet expectations? What does the district do?
Well, we continually monitor those school improvement plans. There's always an element of academic, so that's why we don't dismiss the school report cards in general, but we don't use those exclusively. They're one piece of data, but those school improvement plans and program improvement plans, we look at a lot, and we weigh those heavily. We do want to see growth and continuous improvement mindset with our schools and our student achievement data. So we don't just turn a blind eye to it, where we stand, whether we like the ranking or rating or not. It is informational, and it does speak to us and what we might be able to improve. So whether it significantly exceeds expectation, which we have schools doing that, or meets few expectations, which we had that, we recognize that we're looking to continuously improve, 1% better every day.
Yeah, the state report cards are a requirement under federal law, so ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act, so that's why we have those in our state. There's not really an impact on funding or, required training or anything from those report cards. There's a separate federal joint notification thing that involves mostly students with disabilities, and that can lead to action at the local level, and the DPI supports us if we were involved in that.
other questions?
Okay, 11.10, thank you for those thoughtful questions. 100% of district-owned computers used within the district network are protected using reliable safety measures and firewall security and content filter. And are SEPA compliant. Our Director of Information Technology has a letter there certifying that that is true, and then we have linked 2 policies that we follow in the school district here around our acceptable and safe use of our technology. Indicator 2, identify prohibited sites and information attempted to be accessed by students are flagged and blocked by district filters. We used 2 just examples there. One, a behavior alert report, and then a search term violation report. You can see the data within both those. Those are just 2 snapshots there. But our content keeper program that we instituted here, I want to say, keep me honest here, 3 years ago, somebody who might, yeah, okay. Maybe 3 years ago has proven to be quite effective. If something does come up in this regard, just so the board is aware, we're able to then contact the appropriate administrators in the building and get support and help for students in a rapid way. So we're pleased with that. 11.11, disruptions to the academic day will be discouraged. One, we communicate the importance of continuity of instruction, limiting disruptions. One is email letter from me to our district leadership team, in part a thanks to them for their continued efforts around ensuring the continuity of instruction is kept a priority. And then Student Code of Rights and Responsibilities are in page 2 or 3 of that is the philosophy of harm reduction, and a lot of that has to do with keeping students to the degree possible in school and learning. Indicator 2, substitutes for school and/or district events will be monitored by district administration and building principals for alignment to strategic goals and actions. The evidence here, and this will be one of the pieces that we come back to the board, you remember from last year for an edit. We say in the evidence, please know we're monitoring the actual events for which subs are necessary. We're not monitoring the substitutes themselves. But what we put in here was, in terms of principal evaluation, there is a component in which this is an expectation for our principals, and then a letter from our Director of Human Services, Mr. Wenthy, around substitute monitoring, our substitute monitoring process. 11.12, annual enrollment review for each school, including school capacity analysis, is provided to the board. Annually in our budget plan, I believe it's pages maybe 22 to 29, there's enrollment history and projections. And then annually, we bring forward in January, open enrollment space availability. That's the second link there, so both regular ed and any special ed considerations. And then indicator 2, when necessary, provide potential recommendations and alternatives for student school attendance based on the annual enrollment review and district enrollment projections. Our district uses multiple data sets, UW Applied Population Lab study. There's probably no better link or information than our current website for the referendum planned November 8th. So we linked that website there for this particular report this year. With that, I'll take a breath and see if there are continued questions.
Any questions from the board?
I have a question and observation. The first question is in regard to your discussion of the whole child framework. You were speaking about the mental health supports that we have in the school district. I know one of the things that have been discussed with the board, particularly as we did have students coming forward, was that how could it be better, those resources be better communicated? I just wondered, first of all, do you have an update on that?
Well, I can tell you just the things that we've put in place.
Okay.
Like Cooley Bridges website is a website that has been, I don't know that we've shared it necessarily with the board, but it's an exciting website in terms of access of information for our parents. And it's probably something we should show in a workshop or something to that effect for our Board of Education. And one of the things that we probably should also talk about a little bit is, the Board of Education, we came and we put, I think, $100,000 of ESSER money aside. It's important to note that I don't know that any of that has been touched. I think that speaks to maybe how much are we ensuring that the students and families are aware that there's this resource. Again, we've got, when you think of our student and family assistance program and the variety of different supports we have in terms of social workers that we're sharing with Gunderson and with the county, and including all of our cupboards weren't bare. We have counselors and school social workers and school psychs who are very talented. And so, coming into this school year, I don't have, numbers or things along those lines, but I think it's an effort that we can't really turn our eyes away from. Youth risk behavior survey data has just been released for our county and for our schools. That might be something that the board in a workshop would be interested in. I would tell you for the first time ever that they had questions about, a couple of questions about family that they haven't had in the past, and the indications that our students, of course, this is self-reported, which makes it very powerful student voice information. And we had about 1,242 or 1,224 students, grades 9 through 12 at our high schools who are respondents. And they had indicated that there were significant challenges and concerns at home, which of course makes it difficult for anything that they might be feeling as well. And so, this is something that I think there's COVID and there's the echo of COVID, and I think we're going to be feeling it for quite some time. And so, in terms of data, I don't have, but I would say that our students there's still significant challenges ahead.
Yeah, well, and I'm not asking specifically for data. I'm just asking, has there been any change in communication with students about access for those resources? So an update for that to the board would probably be helpful at some point. The other is just an observation. So on 11.7, as you said, this is something that's been near and dear to this board with regards to making sure the instructional program has a social justice lens. And for example, one of the pieces of evidence that's offered here is the strategic plan for equity. Now, this is an operational policy, so it's just simply asking that those things are in place. The results, as you, I think, even referred to on another piece of that OE, speaks to the things that we expect students to have demonstrated by the time that they graduate. And so my observation is only that with regards to R3, the involved citizenship, particularly points 5 and 6, I would think those two things would be married at some point, because that might just make it easier from an administration standpoint. So just simply an observation.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Ms. Bowman?
So on 11.10, indicator 2 with the behavior alerts and the search term violations, we heard a lot from students at linkages that it was a struggle sometimes to do research with their school assigned devices, that they were often hitting roadblocks. And I know we've discussed this in the past, but some of the search terms that come up look like they're like titles of books that maybe they're doing research on. And I see that some of these are set at like allow. Is there like a timeline that students, when they search, that it's blocked and then it's approved as like an okay search? Or like what is the process for like, allowing a student to do a search on, something that happens to have one of those trigger words?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So like MSP, Michael St. Pierre, our director, shared with us in the workshop. So a lot of times what will happen is something will be initially blocked, and all it really takes is a staff member then to put in a ticket, it's called, to have that website or released. I had this recently because I was trying to get on a website with the Diversity Council had a meeting, and I was blocked. And it took just moments. I had put in a ticket, and it was moments later, so I wasn't even really late for the meeting. So it doesn't, the delay often is not very long. But yeah, you can see in some of those, it could be a completely like benign search term initially.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
As a follow-up to that, are there staff in the buildings who can provide that access, or can, or is it strictly through IT?
Yeah, it comes down through our techs, yeah.
Do students know how to do that? I mean, do they know the process so that if they are blocked, they can go and, I need to do?
Normally, they're pretty vocal about it, and their teachers will pick up like,
And they need to be if they're
Yeah.
working on projects.
yeah.
Right.
Question about 11.12 and the open enrollment space availability. Are there supposed to be numbers in there?
If there are no numbers, it's open.
Okay.
It's unlimited. We can accept,
Okay.
however many can come.
Thank you for that clarification.
And last year, just to follow up on Dr. Cooperstole's question, last year, as students were coming to us, just know that there were presentations at the schools, there were assemblies, there was lots of information going out, but I guess my point was, I don't think that that's an effort that should have a sunset. I think that it's
Right.
I don't know that we should quite be resting and making sure students know the resources available to them at this point.
One thing that we're looking to put in place is more training for youth mental health first aid with students, because one of the things we heard was they may even know of the services, but they're not interested in talking to adults about them. They talk to their friends first, and so ensuring that they have a support network amongst themselves to be able to direct each other towards various things would be useful, so.
It's kind of like peer health advocates at the university level.
Absolutely.
Do you all have someone that's licensed already with the youth version of mental health first aid?
I don't know the status of that right now, but we would be looking to probably certify folks locally if we haven't already, but I suspect we already have trainers identified, so.
Other questions from board members? Ms. Burkett-All.
I have another question for 11.7. And for both indicator 1 and 2. So the first is for indicator 1, in the first link that highlights a list of social justice and cultural competency efforts. It seems just from the surface level that many of those aren't super related to social justice and cultural competency efforts. And then in looking in the staff feedback for those activities, they seem mostly related to what is the back to school stuff called when teachers go back first? I'm blanking.
New teacher.
No, like, yes, thank you. I should know that because I was joking because my husband's last name is Service and he's a teacher, so and yes. Anyway, a lot of those comments seem related to just the general content of the in-service activities and not necessarily related to the content of the social justice and cultural competency efforts. So I don't know if that's a comment or a question. It's more a comment, but just wondering what your thoughts are related to that.
So I think you'll see that even with number 1, tucked under that is going to be such a rich experience for staff. But all these, even when we get into standards-based learning work, we view that as equity work for our students. And so with each one of these, and I think in our workshop today, we'll be going through a list that's pretty robust, and you'll get to see how that kind of, what that looks like, which each one of these looks like. And it's fairly impressive work that's being done at the district level and then at the school level. And I think it'll make more sense, and maybe that's even something in future iterations that gets attached in here, because then you can see how it's stacked. Because right here, it's I think you're on the 1 through 9. Yeah. It might leave you wondering, like, how does that actually apply to the, I think once you see some of the work, like, labeled out, from the district level and then the schools, it's like, okay, now I can understand how it ties together.
Okay.
And it's quite impressive, the last year's work that was done throughout the district.
Awesome. Thank you. My second question question is related to indicator 2 and the reference to the Teaching and Learning Committee. What is the makeup of that? Not necessarily the makeup, but like, because that committee is tasked with improving, the example given here is social studies curriculum rewrite. Is that committee comprised of folks well represented of the communities and the different histories and social studies topics that are being included in rewrites, or how are community members included in that committee like other committees?
Yep. So the Teaching Learning Committee, or the content, so we have district supervisors, and then we've got our content area coordinators, so teachers who are leading those content areas. And then, yes, lots of community members were involved with the social studies community, or the curriculum rewrite. Mhm.
Okay, great, thank you.
Other questions from the board members?
Thank you, Dr. Harsey.
Okay. Hearing no questions, then, I believe we do have some exceptions noted, so at this point, do we feel comfortable that we would be in compliance with exceptions noted? Are there any concerns with marking OE11 with that? Not seeing anybody with major concerns there?
I don't have any concerns.
Okay. Sounds good. Then let us move on to the 2022-2023 proposed budget plan, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Engel.
So this is one of those items that doesn't fall kind of like specifically within operational or results monitoring, but is part of our process as a part of state law for presenting a budget to the school board. And so this budget book is the compilation of lots of little presentations that have been given to the school board over the course of the year to kind of break it up, but then it is rolled together as kind of a summary document that Ms. Sprang puts together and presents on to the board at this time. And this is kind of an initial culmination of a couple more things that will happen in October as it's related to the budget. And so with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Sprang.
Okay, so this is the first of the 4 times that you will see this proposed budget. The proposed budget needs to be public, I'm sorry, let me start over. It has to be in a publication by 15 days before the budget hearing. So that means that October 2nd, you're going to see this in a format that is particular for newspaper, and then on October 3rd, you're going to actually approve it. This proposal will not change until you actually set the levy at the last meeting in October. And that's because a lot of the information is not even known until after October 15th. And so this is your preliminary budget proposal. So the La Crosse is a unified school district, so we do not have to have an annual meeting, as you might hear other districts have to have, but we do have to have that public budget hearing. And then, so this is the first part, but I would like you to go, we're going to go through this pretty thoroughly today because it offers a lot of information that goes into developing the budget for the school district and that board members should know. So remember, this is very preliminary. It does not include the third Friday count of pupils, which was last Friday. The property values we will not receive until October 1st. The aid certification, October 15th, and then the amounts for voucher schools and transfer of service, mid-October. We need all of that information before you can approve a budget and set the levy. So this first narrative, I don't know if anybody's had a chance to read through it, but it's also going to give you some information that will help you through this process of the referendum also. And then, so remember that the revenue limit is what is imposed on a school district, and then the aid from the state is part of how we get that revenue, and what's remaining is for the local taxpayers to pay. So the main component of the revenue limit is enrollment. And as, of course, you know, we are experiencing declining enrollment and have been for many years. So this district in 21-22, we experienced 130 students decline. This proposed budget is estimated 45 students will lose between last year and this year. So that's pretty much due because our graduating classes are larger than the classes that are coming in. This preliminary budget is based on a 3-year average of declining enrollment. I also wanted to point out that this budget is developed with an estimated revenue decrease of $2.4 million. We have been talking about that for some time, and this is the reason why, even though we have decreased the budget proposal by lowering department budgets, school budgets, we took some cost-saving measures and changed our insurance and our health insurance, and we were only able to increase salaries by 2% instead of the requested 4.7% CPIU. And even with those measures, we are going to have a deficit budget proposed for the board. So the next page has the funding priorities. Of course, everything that has been proposed on the instructional side, this budget supports. And it's not only the instructional side, but then, of course, the operations of the district. It also explains the difference between an operating referendum and a capital referendum. We are under an operating referendum. We've gone out for an operating referendum every 5 years since 2004. That operating referendum increases our revenue limit so that we can afford operating expenditures. It will expire in June of 2024, and we will probably need to go out for another one, depending on the state funding for school districts in the next biennium. Then we have the long-range facility planning and related to a capital referendum. So you have been through that process now of a facility planning, which resulted in this referendum that we will go out for on November 8th. This proposed budget was, at this time, is proposed with the levy increase of an approved capital referendum. However, when you get to the point in October where you have to approve the levy, you will approve 2 levies this year. One is if the referendum passes on November 8th, and one is if it won't. It does not really affect so much your operating your operating budget as much as it does the levy itself. Okay? Any questions on those first few pages? I would encourage you to really study them if you are especially a newer board member. The next page is the budget development timeline. And that is something you've seen before. So when Dr. Engel talked about increments that have been presented to you before, that is what he is talking about. They're all included in this budget book. Then it's also pages 6 through 17 are all things that you have seen before. They have the instructional priorities, they have the strategic plan for educational equity, and all of the instructional information, including the administrative goals. So if you go to page 18, we are going to look at a summary of state funding. And of course, this is every 2 years, the state budget. So we know for the second year, which is this coming year, 22-23, what kind of categorical aids and general aids we're receiving. We also know the amount that is allotted towards voucher schools. And then the school levy credits that are shown on a person's tax bill that give taxpayer relief. However, they are considered part of the state educational budget. So, the next one is revenue limits. So let's take a look at that. So revenue limits is the capacity to offer services and programs. State aid and local taxes are used to pay for the services and programs within the revenue limit. An increase in state aid does not increase our ability to spend, but it does lower the tax impact. So the major revenue limit factors are listed there. The preliminary estimates indicate 2.4 million decrease in our revenue limit. The state aid decrease of about $285,000. So if you go back down to the bottom, the definitions are very important. Membership is the FTE of residents, meaning the students that we teach within our school district and the students that live within our district but open and roll out to other districts. We are financially responsible for that, for those students that live within our district. Now, student enrollment is the students that are in the seats. So those could be students that live here or students that have open enrolled into the district. And we especially use the enrollment to determine our staffing needs and our facility needs. All right, and then the next page is the revenue limit increase history. Of course, we cannot update this until third Friday, and then within the revenue limit calculation. So if you took the 11,331 that we are estimating to be the per pupil amount, meaning we have no increase from the state for either years of the state biennial budget, and you multiply that times an average of 124 students, that's over $1.4 million that is taken away from our revenue limit base that we will not have to teach our students in the future. So that per pupil increase that's designated by the state budget is very, very important to grow your base of your revenue limit. Then we also point out that back in 2011-12, Act 10 forced districts to decrease that budgets, but also gave us tools to shift those costs to our employees. So that is something that $588 per student, we've hardly ever had a chance to make that up in the years to come. So then the referenda history, this is very important as we go forward with the referenda. A capital referendum is an approval of debt. An operating referendum does not increase our debt, instead it increases our revenue limit. So we have our current operating referendum there up on top, expires in June of 2024. Down below you'll see the other capital referendums, the one for Northside, building Northside, and then the other one for capital improvements.
Sorry, Spring.
Mm-hmm.
So if we were to assume for a second that we did not have that operating referendum, then if I were to go back to page 19 and look at that revenue limit graph, then instead of having 77 million roughly to spend in 22-23, we would be looking at only having 73 million to spend?
Right.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
So then, and by the way, just stop me if you have questions along the way, because we have a lot to go through. So then the next page is the referenda history. So we've had a lot of questions about when is our current debt going to expire? And this is a good indication that the one for the security upgrades runs out in 2025, and our north side in 2023. And the operating referendum is on top there, which will run out at the end of 2024. So then the next is enrollment history by levels. So we anticipate that we are going to lose those 45 students between the elementary, middle, and high school levels. We will not know this until after the third Friday count, but this is what we are anticipating, pretty much by cohort survival is what we use to indicate that, plus our population studies.
Sorry to interrupt. Can I ask a question about students who are experiencing homelessness? How do they count towards? Are they considered in the district, or are they open enrolling if they don't have a permanent address?
They're in the district.
Okay.
Mhm. Yes. Okay, so the enrollment by history, we you can see by the graph, elementary is red, high school is blue, and middle school is green. And over the years, the elementary is what's most concerning as it has declined the most. The next one is enrollment history, third Friday, September count. As you can see that this is actually by school, and so it's very interesting to look at that history by school and some of the notes down below that have affected our schools in the past. And of course, this will be updated again for your final review of the budget book after third Friday count. Then open enrollment history. So open enrollment rates for 2022-23 for regular ed, that's $8,224 per student. That changes hands between districts, and $13,076 for special ed. So last year, we were pretty even. It shows we had 3 more students going out of the district than coming in. And I think that has a lot to do with us starting our own virtual school so that students didn't have to open and roll out to virtual schools. As you can see in the next page, that's the open enrollment, actually schools by schools and in and out. And so we'll have this updated for you also after third Friday. But one thing that's kind of noticeable is that back in 2019, we had 71 students open and enrolling out to virtual schools. And last year, it was down considerably for virtual schools, so people taking advantage of our CRVA. The next page is, let's see, this one, if you had a chance to look at it during the weekend, I apologize, because I just noticed today that the one that was posted for you didn't have the high school averages in there. Somehow it got cut off when we changed it to a PDF, but we have the current one up here today that shows you the average of the class size counts through the years. And then again, we will update this for the next year. So as you can see on all levels, the average has decreased quite a bit over the past few years. The next ones are the enrollment trends then this is pretty much kind of a summary of our state population lab estimate, and then it's on the UW Extension Applied Laboratory, so that comes down to this page where we put, these are all the projections on top in 3 different ways, and then every year we take those, what's actually happened, and compare that to the extension's projection. So if we are estimating a loss of 44 students, in 22-23, we might come closer to the first trend. However, it's all set. When it's all said and done, we will highlight each level on where it might meet. Okay. and see how close we come to it. The next one is our staffing to enrollment. This is really preliminary because the final staffing is based on third Friday, just like the student count. So this will be updated again for those ratios, but this is just as projected at this time. The next one is the personnel summary. So this is usually attached with this one is a detail of staffing. However, with our shortage in our HR staff right now, they weren't able to compile that in time, but we'll have that all ready for you for the next presentation. And let's see. Oh, then I wanted to talk about the introduction to the financial detail on page 33. I wanted to point out that the funds 10 through 29 are considered our operating funds. That's what supports general education and special ed education. All of the other funds are specific for other needs. So I wanted to point out, so Fund 39, when it says referendum approved debt service, if our referendum passes, this is where the revenue from the levy, the taxes, are put into, and this is where we pay our principal and interest in payments out of. We do not pay any of those out of operating funds. Then the Fund 49, other capital projects. So when we sell municipal bonds, those proceeds are put into Fund 49 so that we can pay the contractors for the project. So those funds are very much segregated from operating funds, so just keep that in mind. And then it also explains the other funds that we have. As you can see, food services is its own fund, and our community service fund is separate also. So then we're going to go into the operating budget funds, the estimated revenues. So it talks about how our local taxes are supporting the revenue, and then the levy estimate, again, how preliminary it is at this point, since we do not know the statewide amount of equalization aid that we will receive that offsets the levy. Then also it goes into the property value. We are estimating a 12% increase in property value in the school district of La Crosse, and the property value has increased quite a bit over the past few years. So those do affect our levy and our mill rate. So then our state equalization aid, we are anticipating that it's going to be about 31% of our budget. It goes into state categorical aids, and those would be aids like your special ed categorical aid, your bilingual, bicultural aid, your transportation aid. Those are categorical aids, different than the general fund aid. It also talks about your state grants and tuitions and open enrollment, how that revenue comes in, and our federal grants and aids. And I do want to point out that our increase to our budget, both in revenue and expenditure this year, is 8.7 million is from ESSER 3 funds. So that's what will increase both the revenue and the expenditures, because those are funds that we will use in this coming year to keep supporting our behavioral and academic coaches, our professional development, our 316 reading license for our teachers. So as there, it's nice to have a visual. The operating revenues are there with the biggest revenue sources being our state aid and our local taxes. Any questions about revenues?
Can I just confirm something that you said, but I just want to make sure I got it right? So Fund 39, you mentioned with the upcoming referendum, if it should pass, paying interest does not come from our operating budget.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So the next page does show the operating revenues and breaks it down between all of the areas from which we receive revenue. and it compares it to last year's budget and last year's unaudited final numbers, and then the final numbers from the prior year. So you have some reflection between what's happened in the past and what's happening in the future. So I want to bring your attention there to the proposed revenue budget of $107 million, because when I show you the expenditures, you're going to see that that number is $109 million. We are entering into a deficit year of $2 million. So then we present the expenditures in two different ways. We present it by program, meaning the purpose or the function, and then also by the type, which means the object in the accounting world. So instruction, it's broken down by instruction, instructional support, district and business services, and within that district and business services is part of the ESSER money for the HVAC upgrades at both Central and at Logan High School. The building administration, and then the general administration, non-employee insurance, and other. We base our budget on a zero base, and we build from there. So our expenditures by program, you can see that the majority of our budget is for instruction and instructional support, because that is our business. The next page is our operating expenditures, again, compared to last year and compared to the year before. So I encourage you to look at those on every level, because this is what comes to you then on a monthly basis and reviewed on a quarterly basis. Once we set that budget, then you see how we are doing comparatively month to month and year to year. The next area is expenditures by
I
type.
have a quick question.
Sure, sorry.
I'm looking at page 41 and 45, and I'm not seeing 22, 23. Is the PDF cut off for other people? Or should it be
41 and 45.
It's 21, 22. So it could just be mine, maybe all right.
Not opening for you?
Her column is cut off.
Yeah. That's all right, I'll
Oh,
circle back.
for 22, 23, or?
Yeah,
Okay,
weird.
okay.
I see it.
Anybody else have that? No?
Just me.
Oh, my, okay.
I might be looking at an older
Okay.
version somehow.
Okay, all right, so then operating expenditures by program, as we said, the majority is for instructional. And, and then we were going by type, and so the majority of our type is compensation, because we are a service organization. Of course, we have to pay our staff to teach.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I noticed, sorry, I'm on page 42.
Mm-hmm.
Under the district and business services, the building operations and maintenance line item jumped from about 10 million to 13 million.
Yes, and that is where that about $5 million is for the HVAC upgrades
Oh.
using ESSER funds.
Got it.
Yes.
Thank you, sorry.
Good
you said that
question.
already.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Okay. So after that, then we also have that breakdown for the operating expenditures by type. So go ahead and compare those when you get a chance. Then the next pages, 47 to 53, are the capital maintenance detail that Mr. Levina has gone over with you probably back in May or June, and how we will plan for the future. This year, 1.2 million is going for the renovations at Central, having to do with moving the office downstairs so that it is a more secure area and people don't have to go all through the school to get to the principal. So that was part of a capital improvement plan during some time that would happen this year. The next one I would refer to, let's see, page wanted to just show you quickly again. Let's see. I think it's page 54. The general obligation debt service levy history, it just shows you again when our debt is running off, and that is what's very important to keep track of, so we know when we can go out to referendum, either operating or capital, without much impact to our taxpayers.
Ms. Frank, on page 52,
Okay?
I'm looking at the capital maintenance and improvements projected needs summary, and I noticed that for the Central High 1.2, that the bid project contingency is not included. Can you help me understand that?
Yes, so as you can see that he usually does have a contingency line, and on this one, he did not put it in because he felt that the whole amount would be
Sufficient.
Be used, so would be efficient.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
And I know this is something that we've said numerous of times, but I just want to be clear around when we talk about the referendums, the amount that we're asking for does not increase for taxpayers, correct?
The amount of the referendum is $194.7 million. That is the cost of the project, okay? The amount of debt is, of course, the principal and the interest, but that is included when we're talking about the impact on our taxpayers.
Thank you.
Okay, this is really two separate things, but yes.
We cannot levy more than is authorized by the referendum. That is the max.
Correct. That's a good way of putting it. So next one of our favorites is Fund 80. So this Fund 80 is a separate levy that the board approves when we set all levies. And this is really our shining star because of all of our community partnerships that we work with, that that they're over and above serving just our K-12 students. That's page 55, I'm sorry, is the introduction. And we break it down by these areas. So after school programming and building community use, our community liaisons, community partnership programs, which include a lot of the La Crosse System of Care program, Hinchin-Huber Neighborhood Project, Shoe-Mellon Community Partnership, YWCA Restorative Justice Program, and the La Crosse Promise are programs in this category. We work with the city, the county, and all of these entities to provide this for our community. And then the community school coordinators, of course, we have the two community schools that not only serve those students, but the community within that area. And then, of course, the Logan Pool and the SROs. So, so this levy here is the levy proposed. And when we levy in this fund, we can, if we have funds left over, we can only spend those leftover funds in that area in which we levied. So as those who have been here a couple of years recall that during the COVID year, we didn't spend a lot of these funds because we couldn't connect with people. So those funds that are left over are pretty much used up. So that's why we have to increase our levy again so that we can meet our services. And we've expanded some of the services within our programs. So this is the reflection of the increase in services. This is not the budget. I will point out the budget for Fund 80 on a later page. This is what we will levy. Questions about Fund 80?
Questions on the after school. I mean, is that just I'm guessing that's an increase because we had money, we hadn't used it during COVID. And so last time we didn't have to levy as much, now we are levying more this time.
Yeah, Hamilton and Northside, in our partnership with the Boys and Girls Club, have expanded there. And so we're providing more services at those locations, and so we've increased our commitment to the Boys and Girls Club in that area. And
That would
then,
make sense in the building community use, because, I mean, we didn't have the buildings open as much during COVID, so that's why. And then the community liaisons must be a little bit higher because of.
that's a restoration of kind of where we were at before.
Yep.
And then
And then the next one, the partnership.
the community partnership programs. One of our outcomes from the school resource officer report was to expand our restorative justice services to the high schools. And so this includes an increase from, I think, $50,000 to $150,000 for that partnership with the YWCA to expand restorative practices to all of our secondary
And
schools.
where would I think we entered in kind of a different, with the county, with social workers. Is that reflected in any of this?
That's a unique program. It's not reflected here. So we, essentially, the county contracts our employees' services to work with our kids on cases they would already be working with anyway if we had social workers for those jobs. And so it allows us to provide good wraparound services to kids and then be compensated for through the county. So that's not reflected here, but it's a separate program.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on Fund 80?
And just for clarification pieces too, with the daycare services in the Logan Pool, we don't have those anymore? Or we're not putting money towards that, or how's
We
that?
have money that's left over
Okay.
that we can use without having to tax this year.
Tax it.
Next
Okay.
year, we might have to, so.
Gotcha.
The daycare service, I think that was a one-time thing where we partnered
Oh, the daycare services, yeah, that was only during
COVID.
Okay.
Yeah, that, I'm sorry, I was thinking the other. Yeah, the pool and then where is it? No, not the after-school program.
The early
Like-
childhood community
Yes,
partnerships.
that's it. Mhm. Early childhood. Okay. All right, and then again, we go into our fund summary. Again, showing, Fund 39 is for the repayment of capital referendum approved debt, meaning both the principal and the interest. And then the next one is the fund summary. So this one will show you, actually, if you go down, it looks like at Fund 80, Community Service, the revenues include the levy, but they also include donations for, like, the food pantries and other donations. So that's why that revenue looks higher than the actual tax levy. And then, of course, as you can see, the expenditures are much higher because we'll be using funds that we have reserved in there that we had left over. I do want to point out that this budget, it looks kind of funny if you look at Fund 10 and then Fund 27. So it looks like our expenditures are lower than our revenue in Fund 10. But what that doesn't include, as you look at Fund 27, is that transfer amount. So in Fund 27, we have expenditures of over $16 million. However, from state aid, we only have about 6.5 million. So general fund has to cover that expenditure for special ed that's not funded by the state. So if you increase, so that's over $10 million, so if you increase the revenue for special education, it's going to wipe out that 16 million. We can never have any kind of balance in Fund 27 at the end of the year. And it'll increase your Fund 10 expense by 10 million. And then you will see then that we are exceeding, again, our revenues by close to $2 million. So then the other funds are the Fund 11, those are grants and projects. So usually that revenue and expenditure will match. because they are reimbursable. But last year, we received the Get Kids Ahead grant from the state, which has to do with student mental health. And we did not spend it, so we will be spending it in this next year. So our expenditures exceed the revenues because those dollars are in fund balance designated for this. Special education, other special projects, the non-referendum debt service, capital expansion fund, food service, community service. Any question about those funds? Okay. The next page is the revenue limit, state aid, total levy, and local impact. So this is good to see because it supports a lot of our information that we have in our referendum packet. If you look at our revenue limit, this is our estimated revenue limit, the change from last year, a reduction of 2.4 million. State aid is down about 285,000. Total levy, and that includes the proposed referendum. Now, when we are budgeting or levying for debt, it's two different amounts because we have to levy for debt that's payable in March of our school year and September of the next school year. So you're always levying for a calendar year, but you're expending for a fiscal year. So those are why our revenues look like they're exceeding our expenditures because we have to have money in there to pay our debt payments in September of the next year because we have no revenue yet. So then this also is based, so the total levy, that includes that, and it's divided by an increased property value. And that's how we come up with the $10.06 for an anticipated mill rate, which we have been telling our taxpayers. And that is because that is the increase from last year. So then we also put in there after the school levy credits and the first dollar credits that you see on your tax bill, that our net levy rate would be closer to $8.18. Questions on that? Okay. So the next one are the tax levy breakdown, how we anticipate that $59 million of gross levy will be split out. And then this will, of course, be updated when we know both of our levies, and you will be able to see that breakdown then. And then we will also update the rest of this budget book. That was a lot. Thank you for listening. Any questions?
I have some questions, but not directly to you. I think this is probably to the president of explaining, or could you explain to some of the newer members, now that we've read this, what is the board's responsibility and what power do we have within this document?
Well, so the board's responsibility, obviously one of our major responsibilities is passing a budget. And so what Ms. Sprang has shared with us is part one. As she described, we will see this again 3 more times. At the end of October, we will be voting as a board to determine whether we want to accept this budget. There will be more information forthcoming. This is, like any item that comes forward to the board, an opportunity to raise questions, an opportunity to bring your thoughts and suggest, concerns, I guess I would say. For example, when people were asking, I think Ms. Birkendahl asked, well, hold on a second here, what is the difference here? I see $9 million the year before, and now I see $13 million. Can you help explain that? That is what we are looking for. We want to ensure that the administration can explain the changes that we are seeing from year to year. We hope that we are seeing a balanced budget from year to year. This year, we are seeing a deficit budget, which I was going to ask Ms. Spring to explain what happens when we have a deficit budget. And so that'll be something that I'll have her explain. But this is one of the most important pieces that comes before the board, that the power to pass a levy for our constituents to ensure that we have a school district that is providing a high-quality education to the students of the community.
Thank you.
And Ms. Spring, could you explain because we have not necessarily had a deficit budget before, so could you explain what happens?
Well, we've had a deficit budget quite a bit.
Yeah.
But not in the last maybe year, couple of years. So what happens is we have to use our fund balance. And you only really want to use your fund balance for one-time expenditures. So back, I think it was in July, where we had the board approve our fund balance designations. And that resulted in, actually, last year, we had less expenditures than we had revenues. And the reason why is because we had $822,500 from the governor that we did not use last year, so that added to our fund balance. We also had a TIF district close, which added about $300,000 of revenue that we didn't anticipate. But mostly, we had so many support positions that we had budgeted for that we could not fill last year. So we still anticipate, we hope we will fill them, mostly in the way of teacher assistants. But that added to our fund balance. That is going to help us through this deficit in the next year, because usually we don't add to our fund balance, but this year we did, and that's great because we can use it to offset this deficit and not terribly affect our fund balance for the future. But we do need to make these cuts and make some major changes, because you do not want to take $2.4 million from your fund balance every year, because you will end up with no fund balance and nothing to help you through those months when you don't have any revenue coming in. So that's the danger there, and that's why we are working in all different areas to reduce our expenses.
How will offloading some buildings help that situation?
Well, it certainly will help in operational costs for the buildings, and then, of course, they're probably not needed as much staff. So, we figure that that's down the line, and in every year, we have, even in this year, even with this deficit, we reduced positions through attrition. They were just things that we didn't have enough students to need a teacher or a custodian. So we cut some positions, but they were always because somebody retired or left the district. So we didn't have to cut any of our current staff or lay people off. And that's what you really want to work towards. And then we will know which way we need to go once this referendum either passes or doesn't. So
Our challenge with using fund balance to get through this year is that those are ongoing expenses that we're using one-time funds for to get through 1 year. And then we're hopeful that some things change in the next year. That said, we already know that our our declining enrollment exemption for next year is about $1.3 million. So that's we'll have $1.3 million less next year after this one. And we'll also have to come up with the $2.4 million on top of that. So we're looking at probably a $3.5 million deficit going into the next school year after this one with this budget. And so That highlights the need to consolidate buildings, our estimates without factoring in just like building operational costs, but the efficiency we gain by closing one elementary is about 1.3 million. One middle school is about 1.8 million, and a high school would be 2.5. And so that's what allows us to find ongoing savings for the long haul that will allow us to balance our budget and continue to offer those low class sizes, programs for kids, and compensation for teachers. So while they're tough decisions, that's what we're facing.
Ms. Brickdahl?
Do we invest any of the revenue coming in?
Yes, we do.
So how much have we lost this year?
Well, actually, we anticipated that our interest was going to go way down. In the last few years, it's gone down, but now it's on an uptick, so, we hope to increase that, but it's never enough to cover.
Our investments are super short-term, and so they're pretty liquid, and they're also very conservative.
Sure.
It's bond markets and things, and so what little we do have to invest, we're not at much risk. With a referendum, you have a bunch of cash that shows up all at once. That can be invested too, and with interest rates the way they are right now, on conservative investments, that would generate a fair amount of additional funds that could be put back into that project for something extra.
The other thing this spring is fund balance percentage can also impact our ability to borrow, correct?
Exactly. If this, right now we have a Standards and Poor rating of AA, which is very good, but before any type of borrowing, we do have to go through that process again. And yes, our fund balance is very important to that rating.
I have a question. And I understood it at first, and now I'm like second guessing myself. So can you explain the levy piece and the referendum and how they're different? And can you just explain those two?
Sure, I'll try. So the cost of the project is $194.7 million, okay? And that is what we will go out to borrow. But when we are figuring the impact on taxpayers, we take into consideration not only the principal, but the interest on it. And then we go out for municipal bonds. And then at that point, we have a debt schedule that we follow to pay back. So as you see, as some of the debt is running off in the next few years, then perhaps the debt payment for our new debt would be higher, so it equals it out, okay? So that's what we talk about. But then the levy is what comes from the debt schedule, how we're paying that back. So that's the difference, as far as the cost of the project and then the cost of repaying the debt, which we plan on staggering through the year. So it's not an impact to our taxpayers as if we are borrowing $194.7 million at one time, or that we've never had any debt.
Okay.
So districts who have to go out for a referendum and have no debt, it's going to be a larger impact on their taxpayers than it might be for a district who has debt and they've managed it to not impact the taxpayers.
We're able to kind of pay off one loan at the same time we're picking up another. So if we were starting from zero with no loan, then it would be a pretty significant increase in mill rate and tax levy. But because we have loans we're paying off, we're able to kind of ease that transition and for the small increase to what taxpayers are paying from one year to the next. If we didn't pass this referendum, taxes would drop. Be like paying off your car and not picking up a new car loan.
Does that help? Keep the questions coming. It's a
Complicated.
process. Mhm.
All right. Any other questions from the board?
Can I just make a comment for the report next year?
Sure.
This is just something that makes it easier for me to read each page, because some of the tables have the dates ascending and some have the dates descending, and I have to I don't know, retrain my brain when they change, so I'm not suggesting change it this year, because that'd be a lot of work, but maybe next year, just something to keep in mind.
Tell me more. So just the different charts.
So sometimes it starts from the furthest away date and goes up, and some of the charts go in the reverse.
Okay, we can look at that, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, whatever we can do to make this easier for others to understand. It's
Like,
a lot
I
of
think I quoted to
information.
my family that, because one of the charts shows how much we get per student per year, and because it starts with this year and goes down, I read it in the reverse. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're getting like 700 for students, and we used to get 1,100 or whatever it
Oh,
was, but
sure,
you know what I
gotcha.
mean?
Hearing no other comments or questions, then we will move on to the announcements, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Baumann.
I don't have any to share.
All right. I only have one. I will be out of town at our next board meeting, so Vice President Korberg will be leading the board meeting on October 3rd. I believe that's the next meeting. So that's my only announcement that I have, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Engel.
We have a community information session for the referendum tomorrow at 6:30 at Logan Middle School for anyone that's interested in attending.
Wonderful. And then we'll move on to agenda planning.
I'll make a motion to approve the October 3rd, 2022 Board of Education agenda with any additions or corrections.
Is there a second? All right, moved by Mr. Korberg and seconded by Mr. Spivey to approve the October 3rd, 2022 Board of Education agenda with any additions or corrections. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion has carried, and we will move to adjourn to closed session for the purposes stated in Wisconsin Statute Section 19.85, subsections 1F. The La Crosse Board of Education will consider a motion to move into closed session on Monday, September 19th, 2022, immediately following the Board of Education meeting, Room Tech 1A, pursuant to Wisconsin Statute Section 19.85, Sub 1, Sub F, for the purpose of considering financial, medical, social, or personal histories or disciplinary data of specific persons, preliminary consideration of specific personnel problems, or the investigation of charges against specific persons, except where paragraph B applies, which, if discussed in public, would be likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data or involved in such problems or investigations, to wit, consider administration's recommendation to issue the conditional enrollment order. Is there a motion to adjourn to closed session?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, so moved by Mr. Spivey, second by Ms. Leahy to move to closed session, and if I could have a roll call, please, Ms. Steigerwald.
Ms. Baumann?
Here.
Aye. Thank you. Ms. Birkendahl? Dr. Cooper-Stoll? Dr. Garcia?
Aye.
Ms. Leahy?
Aye.
Ms. Moots? Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Mr. Spivey?
Aye.
Dr. Jimenez?
Aye. Motion has passed, and we will move to closed session, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Is it upstairs, Laura?
Downstairs in Tech 1A.
Downstairs, 1A.